Thanks for joining us here this morning, and this is session T2.10. My name is John Fletcher. I'm the Associate Provost at East Carolina University. I've been there for about almost 8 years, and actually this function reports to my division, Enrollment Services, so I'm interested in it from a couple of different perspectives. One of the things that would help me as we begin this presentation this morning would be to understand where you're coming from. So I know Texas, and your role there is registrar. So certification is certainly under your purview.
Actually, it's financial aid.
Oh, okay.
They contact us a lot.
Okay, cool.
Small firms, my name is from Fletcher University, associate registrar, and the scopes are in my office.
Excellent. Okay.
I'm Sarah Iverson. I'm from Trinity University in San Antonio. I'm the associate registrar there and the VA certified official.
Perfect.
Colette Rafael, Tulane University, and the SEO is located in the registrar's office.
Cool. Very good. How about in the very back corner?
And Azalea College, my name is Zeta Wilkerson, and I'm the registrar and also serve as the VA certified official and oversee all of our testing and assessment.
Excellent.
And I'm Karen Whittier, and I'm from Vanderbilt University, and I'm located in the registrar's office, and I also serve as an SEO.
Cool. Thank you.
I'm Lauren. I'm from James Madison University and I'm an SEO.
Cool. Excellent.
I'm Brittany Galloway. I'm the assistant registrar at Covenant College, and I'm the SEO.
Cool. Now, I'm going to admit a little bit of surprise we have as many SEOs, and that's awesome because as we go through this presentation and we understand a little bit of the history, it will be very important for our certifying officers to buy into what we're trying to do. To many of us, it seems like it's almost a no-brainer. It just makes a lot of sense to remove some of the processing, the button pushing out of our certifying officers' responsibilities to enable them to have more time to interact with our veterans, and in some cases, dependents. So I'm glad you're here, and I look forward to, if you have comments or thoughts as we go along, it's really a good opportunity since we're going to record this session that we'll get those kind of on the record, if you will, and we'll use those as we move forward. So why are we doing this today? Well, basically we've been charged with picking up the ball, if you will, from a group of folks that started this effort some time ago. So we have several goals. Some are a little shorter term than some of the other ones. In fact, one of the things we'll talk about as one of our shortest terms will be finding ways to communicate our completion information with our friends at the VA. And so we will work on that. But a longer term goal is to find ways to share the information that we'd like to share for VA CERT. And that's a little bit more of a challenge because we may not have all those data elements that we need yet to accomplish that. So as we move forward, I'm going to take this is basically the overview of what we'll do here this morning in about an hour, give or take a few minutes. And so we'll talk about how we got to this point today and a little bit of an overview about the proposal. And I would say, and yes, we'll discuss the benefits of the program. And then the current status and getting involved and what our next steps are. So now I'd be remiss if I didn't identify, and if you don't know Shelby Stanfield, Shelby's actually this guy like right here, obviously a much younger picture, Shelby, so good work on that. So, Shelby and this group, Tom and Brenda and Scott, deserve a lot of credit for the work that has already been done. And Shelby's gracious to be here today with us because he has so much of the background that just is in his head. And it's a little tougher to get into that sometimes in the life. So, but it's good to have Shelby here, and he'll be a contributor. But it is important to recognize a lot of this work has been done. And so what we're doing is picking it up, good football analogy, we're picking up the ball, and we're going to advance it to the goal line. Maybe that's a good way to say it. So I could have some Winter Olympics thing, but I couldn't think of a good one. So really, over the past 3 years, what have we been doing? And so we've in 2014, this concept was created, as many great ideas are created, literally on the back of a napkin. I mean, a small group of folks were sitting around and somebody said, what if we were able to leverage the power of what the clearinghouse can bring to us and use it for a function like this? And so that's essentially where it started. And then at the SACRAO 2015 meeting in Baltimore, a group of registrars were able to sit around the table and talk with some of the veteran leadership to review and discuss what the challenges and opportunities might be. So what we've tried to do over the course of that time is to expand who we've communicated with, to try to bring into the fold, if you will, as many folks as we could. So there's been conversations with Student Veteran Association leadership, with the NAVPA. Are any of you SCOs members of that? Okay. Oh, cool. That's great. Because we'll talk about that a little bit later and how to re-energize our relationship with that group. So that's really important. And we've done a presentation to that group, at least one in the past. So a group of believers in this project actually met with the Veterans Administration and made a presentation in December. Whoops, fat fingers. And so that's what really got us to where we are with the current process. So I'm confident that some of you have probably seen this process map, the before and the after. And while this is really just an example, it certainly didn't look very different from actually the process that currently is in place, because we really haven't changed it yet, okay? So what does the process look like? That's actually the old process. And I apologize, it's very difficult to see that. So we will post this presentation on the web, on the SACRAO website when we're done, and you can look at it in more detail. Or if you'd like, we can certainly send this information to you directly for your review. We can do that. That's how we believe, at the point the work started, that the process existed. So we'll need to, the work group that's been formed will need to begin our efforts by reviewing this to make sure that's still consistent with the current practice, for sure. So what could it look like? Okay, sorry, a little far ahead. So this process was designed and agreed to by several of the certifying officers, Texas, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and University of Missouri-Columbus, and have been confirmed by other certifying officers from Syracuse, St. Louis, Colorado State, Hopkinsville Community College. So this is what that group, once they got together, believed that this process could really work like as we move forward. And so again, we're glad to share this information. A task of the work group will be to review both what we think the current state is and how this process may yet still be improved. So one of the reasons that the Clearinghouse has been such a good partner from higher education across really many different dimensions is the power of the information that we already provide to them as part of their service to us and our students for loan verification and other things. And so it's really the previous group and our current work group feels it's really critical to be able to leverage that in working with this ecosystem. So currently, we've asked schools to indicate veteran status via their registrar submitted data. Now, how many of you folks are doing that? Is everybody doing that? So a few may be. That is something that is an option still yet. So you don't have to do it, but for us to make this work, we would certainly need to do it. We currently collect course grade, degree enrollment information, and major information to support other services, right? So we want to establish liaison compliance reporting relationship between institutions with the USCD, including Compliance Resource Center for institutions and daily used registrar managed updates to federal systems. So, and partners with the institutional registrars and or financial aid office to enable continuous process improvements throughout this. So remember, this is two smaller efforts that may be a lot larger effort. So for Texas, for example, you have another state system that this may even be further used to assist you in helping those benefits come through. Free reporting platform allowing institution school systems to evaluate program efficacy in a more complete manner. So here's kind of where we are. We're thinking that we could bring a similar process to bear for veteran services as we've done with Title IV funds. That would seem to make sense. So if you think about it, the current process, again, where this is the reporting structure, there's many lines, both dotted and solid, and the proposed new process would be far cleaner and more simplistic. So any questions on that? We're fortunate we have Joe Roof, who is one of our regional directors for the clearinghouse here today, and either Joe or Shelby could speak to, or I can speak to any questions you might have about that model. So here's a kind of a somewhat brief overview of our proposal. So assist with new statutes and regulations. But for us, the most low-hanging fruit is actually number 2. Improve completion reporting and comparison tool statistics. For most everyone I've spoken with, this is a win-win-win-win-win. So it would enable institutions to report completions far better than we do now. And that would help us with our completion rates, the VA with their completion rates, and then it doesn't put as much burden on the student. An example I just heard this morning, so a student takes their last class at a community college, they don't file for their benefits, they just say, I'm just paying the $185, and no one knows. So that's why it's important for us to find a more programmatic way to do this. And then we'd like to redesign the certification and recertification process by leveraging the data flows that flow into the clearinghouse. So if you think about it, here's how we would suggest how we can demonstrate that this is an efficient system. So this is basically how our institutional information flows now to the clearinghouse. It's very straightforward. It really, I hate to say it happens automatically because it doesn't, but it is so much less painless. Was anybody in higher ed before we had the clearinghouse? So some of us were. I promise you, this was the worst of the worst. And so for many of you that had not experienced our Title IV certification before the clearinghouse, it's hard to appreciate that benefit. But I know I certainly do, and others as well. So here's how this currently happens. It's basically all entered by hand. Multiple people touch it, it goes here, and then it finally goes over to the folks at the VA, okay? So there's an awful lot of hands and other activities in that process, right? So what we'd like to see would be institution reporting, just like we do now, to the clearinghouse. We know there are some pieces of information that are missing. And we've asked you to already help us with some of those. But we need to ensure that for everyone that wants to participate, that you do that you add this to your information that you're sharing with the clearinghouse. And so once the clearinghouse would get it, they would essentially send it forward to the Department of Veteran Affairs. We believe this would improve the efficiency, have increased service to veterans, and better data analysis and information. So we take a lot of hands out of the process. So the completion component has 3 different steps. The first one is you have to opt in. I don't know that we'll get to I'm not sure that the VA is in a position now to require this, so it's an opt-in. It will only help you, help your veterans, help the VA. The second requirement is that institution will modify what you report through your submission to the clearinghouse. The third step would be that the VA would allow our clearinghouse partners to work with their technology team to develop a file that we could do the updates and allow VA Once and VA CERT to accept data from clearinghouse for completions. So the goals of this proposal are designed to support veterans and institutions, really to assist with these statutes. We've already gone over this. So let's focus now on the last proposal that is a little bit further out than the completion. The completion one we believe we could address in the near term. Okay, so to begin full certification process with National Student Clearinghouse reporting the biodata. This is the same thing we do now. It looked really familiar. It shouldn't be a surprise. This is how that same information gets to the Department of Veterans Affairs. Those processes are similar to what we just shared. So if we combine that information, how would that look? Again, our institutions report an enhanced file to the clearinghouse. You can see there's some elements that we know that are currently missing that we would have to add to make this work. And then the clearinghouse would report it to the Department of Veterans Affairs. And the opportunities, again, are improved efficiency, increased service to our veterans, and then better data analysis and information, right? So these steps are perhaps, this work was done within the last couple years, but so they may need to be changed as our work group comes together. But initially, the steps would be getting the VA to allow the clearinghouse to work with our technology team or their technology team to develop a direct input interface, okay? And that would allow VA Once or VA CERT to accept data from the clearinghouse for completions and biodata and terminations. Okay? The second step, the VA would have to allow the clearinghouse to work with their technology teams to develop the eligibility and certification interfaces between the Student Clearinghouse, VA Once, VA CERT. And those would cover the certification and recertification. So what are the implications of this transformation and how would students be better served by institutions? So continued ownership of the data by the institution and data reporting submissions controlled by the certifying officer. I mean, that's critical. They're going to remain an important part of this structure. We believe there could be huge gains of efficiency. Student status change could be reported daily and eliminate some of our, I know none of you have any issues with refunds with your student, your VA students. So timing issues would be could be eliminated. Veteran Services Office could focus on higher order student needs. I mean, that's something we're striving for in all of our work in our offices, to really eliminate as much of the button pushing and really have more face time with the folks that really need us to try to help them solve their really legitimate problems. Would be standard driven, and that's a big charge of this work group, is to establish what data is needed and to begin to come up with definitions for new elements as needed. Ease of work, we'd hope that would be, there wouldn't be any additional requirements as we have new regulations. And one of the big things would be the opportunity for error reduction. So accurate reporting of progression and completion measures would allow for a more complete assessment of the program. So this is a timeline that was developed fairly early on. And we're still in the in fact, our new work group has not met yet. We hope to meet at SACRAO at the end of March. And so really we're still we're not at day zero because much work has been done. But if you think about a true start somewhere in March or April, and then rolling this information forward is probably a pretty legitimate way to look at it. So what are the major benefits? And you know, you can see there's over 1.2 million currently enrolled. I mean, it's amazing. Improve speed and timeliness, accuracy, reducing errors, and efficiency, measuring the program efficiency real time. So there's a lot of information in this. I'm going to pick out a few of the highlighted things. So basically, minimizing overpayments and debt, preservation of benefit due to gaps in timeliness of information sharing. So that's one of the huge possible benefits. So basically, there were $400 million in overpayments made in 2014, which have been attributed to training primarily. So major program benefits accrued to veteran program administrators. So again, the three elements that we're looking for. So most significant in that, the SEOs moved from blocking and tackling to higher order, that's cute, to higher order work with our student veterans. Okay? So major benefits accrued to institutions. So the biggest one, this is basically reallocation of staff from veteran paperwork, processing to support staff. You know, that's counseling, academic advising, or other things that are needed by the staff. So huge benefits to, we believe, huge benefits to the VA. The biggest one, and the one that we think we can do the soonest, accurate completion data from one common source. So here's the goals of our work group. And again, we haven't started yet, and we will review these as a group when we meet. Validate and refine the proposal and process flow. Remember, that was the first charts we showed you. Identify required data items. Inventory common data between the enrollment and VA with the same data definitions. Inventory common data between enrollment VA, enrollment reporting VA, with different data definitions. So I'm confident that all of us have different ways of describing the data that are contained in our student systems. The same will be true with our enrollment reporting and the VA systems. And then inventory and define a taxonomy for new data items. Many, many, many schools are already engaged in this effort and are supporting this the way that we believe we can serve our schools, our students, and our veterans better. So this is just a partial list. I've got a URL here. We encourage you to join our listserv. There's a great, there's a lot of information about this. You can go to this website right here. It has a ton of information. And if your institution is supportive, I encourage you, and I'll share these things with you guys. So I encourage you to go and sign up as someone supporting the effort. Strength in this case will really be in numbers. We will speak much louder as a group with the same interest as opposed to one or two individual institutions. I know when Shelby shared with me a story that when they met with the administrator of the VA, he said something like, and you can tell it better than I, but so, with 12 of you or 16 or whatever, are you the only 16 people that are interested in doing this? So that's why the more of us that support this effort, the louder our voice will be. Okay? Cool. So what you can do today, you can submit your enrollment data with the veteran flag enabled. At your institution, you can partner together to raise attention to this opportunity. Within your state, you can join other state schools that have been speaking with their representatives in this regard. And among your peers, consider discussing the system really with higher ed organizations, period. So I knew we kind of blew through this pretty quickly. Some of you may have seen this before. It's not a brand new thing, but we made a lot of progress. We hit a brief pause, and now we're prepared to move forward with as quickly as we can get it done would be our preference. So I would be glad to address any questions, or I've got Shelby here who his background is far more extensive in this than mine. So yes.
I've got a couple actually. The first is, so does this allow for early reporting of this information? That might be more of a clearinghouse question. Because I know students depend on getting certified prior to the start of classes because things like book stipends and living expenses and things like that. So how would that kind of work? Or you might not know the answer to that yet, but just a consideration, I know that.
Yeah, we hope it will. As John mentioned, and I'll just give a little backstory, then we'll get into this. When we went and met with the VBA, the Veterans Benefits Administration, there's a group of about 12 of us. And we met for 3 hours. We're both the technical team and the operations team from the VBA. And we walked through the entire proposal. And Major General Worley basically didn't say anything for the whole 3 hours. So at the very end of that meeting, and he asked 2 questions, and I thought they were 2 of the most astute questions that could be asked. One is, how feasible is it to do this? Right? The other is, how much community interest is there in this effort? Or is it just y'all that are here? So since that time, we've been going out to pull together demonstrable evidence on both of those. One, the program efficacy, and that it is feasible, and there is widespread community interest in this. And this is what has come to light through discussions in the last couple of years. And most websites list all the schools that have said, yes, we're interested. So that URL that John showed you, I'd encourage you to go out. Look at that website. There's a lot of information and some background about the project, and also an opportunity for you to sign up. It doesn't commit you to it, but what it does allow us to do is take this information back to the VBA and say, look at the community interest here that there is. The reason why we're partnering with SACRAO is for that very reason. In discussions with Mike Riley, he says, yes, there's tremendous opportunity here, both from a data aggregation and reporting from the efficiencies that a robust national technology platform can provide to this, but then it also provides us opportunities to revisit kind of how the program administration in total, which gets into the timing. So the first part of the plan, so with SACRAO's endorsement, this is where Mike Riley sent out a call for SACRAO participation. John Fletcher, he didn't mention it, but he's chairing the work group, and he's assembling a team of individuals that are familiar in the space, both with the enrollment reporting responsibilities of the institutions, as well as the VA reporting in the institution. That's critical. To look at the process models that we put together today, to look at what a potential re-engineering effort would look like, leveraging off the enrollment reporting platform, and then to define the new data elements. So the first order of business with the work group is just to define the data elements and the collection and how we would code them, the taxonomy. That would be needed within the existing process model. Right? The second order of business could be, once we have that, are there opportunities for process improvement through thinking differently about the time? Now, one thing that's come to light since this, I've learned far more about the VA. The VA reporting is done in my office at UT Austin, and I have 6 people that do this process, and it's an extremely manual labor-intensive process of doing all the data entry the VA wants. And part of that process is we start certifying as soon as students register for the upcoming semester, which is about 5 months before the semester starts. And then every time they do an adjustment to their schedule, if they change their major, we recertify. So we currently recertify 60% of our student veteran population. So that's a lot of churning. So what we hope to create is an opportunity to think of them about the certification, recertification process. Where one idea is maybe you certify one time, you go past your census mark, and then you do a final certification, and you create some way to reconcile any particular gap that occurred in the meantime, right? Maybe you can make that up for the next semester. Do something like that, rather than the certification,
Constant,
recertification
yeah.
on constant basis. So I know that's a long-winded answer to your question, but the first order of business is to look at the data collection and data flow under the existing process models, and then say, once we have that, where's there opportunity for process improvement through re-engineering the entire process? One thing that's been interesting to get around that churn that we do at UT Austin, I know some schools set a registration hold for their student veterans that once they've certified them, they don't allow them to schedule changes. And they do that just because they don't have the staff capacity and the bandwidth to handle the recertification process. So
We don't certify until after the drop ad deadline
Yeah.
to
So see, this
to
might
manage
work
some of that.
ideally,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
but then you have to be very conscious about the turnaround time frame for them to get their benefits and get those benefits to the institution.
Well, at our institution, because we're a small private institution, we have no veterans. Ours are all dependents. So
Oh,
there's a little
yeah.
less concern
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah,
I just tell them I'm not doing it till after the ad deadline.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the thought of enrollment changes being able to go through clearinghouse. You know, a student drops a course, it drops them down to halftime or three-quarter time or whatever. But I think that from the initial onset, you know, I know when we get ready to certify a student, we're checking to make sure every course is on the degree plan. Has the student failed this course before? Is it a class that the student has passed before that they're just taking for a higher grade? Does their program require that? You know, there's so many rules and regulations on that initial certification process. So I feel like, you know, because we're held accountable for that when it comes to our audits with the VA, there would still have to be some kind of manual oversight if we're going to be held accountable to those things.
And I think that's an important point for the certifying officers, because there's some thought out there that if this system develops like it could and it's fairly automated, that we might not need that staff person. That's a ridiculous thought because of the very things you just mentioned. There has to be oversight, and there's just a need for them to interact with our veterans. So we certainly are missing that, but yeah, we recognize that there has to be some intervention on the part of the institution. I mean, that could be done human, or it might be done with your degree office system. I mean, I think this is an iceberg, and we can kind of think we see what it looks like now, but I don't think we have a real good idea about what it looks like under the surface. And so as we start to get to the under the surface part, then we may be able to make improvements to even what our current institutional practices are. Did I see another hand? Did you guys? No.
That was my second question, was about, you know, I can understand on maybe an enrollment report, on an initial cert, saying they were certified for 9 hours or whatever, but it's the changes and the restarts and all of that. You know, there's just a lot of fact checking that goes on to doing a cert. And really, I think my staff, my previous institution, my staff didn't mind doing that because there's a lot of conversations that happen with the student, and especially when they need to drop and there's mitigating circumstances and they can work with the student and there's history there. Really, I think what they would be most pleased with and do part goes over is not having to duplicate the entry into VA1. Because they're entering it into our student database systems. They were on Colleague, and so there's a module in Colleague to enter all that. And so there's a record of the process, whatever. But then to go into and enter, especially on a new veteran student, all of that information, name, address, ID number, all of that, it's just a time suck. And when they're processing 3,000 veterans, it takes six people working full throttle all the time to make it happen.
Yeah, and that's an important point. The first iteration of this proposal doesn't change the data ownership,
Right.
but it provides a consistent and persistent data platform for the SEOs to manage that data in a single consolidated place, and you still have direct access to it. But from a data aggregation and then reporting, there's where your large efficiency gains are. And it's another worth mentioning, it's not, while the visuals just kind of show it's an extension of enrollment reporting, because with the data, it really is an extension, but it won't be, as far as the platform that would be delivered by the clearinghouse, it won't be an extension of enrollment reporting. It will be a new VA data collection and reporting system. So it can have those built-in access to persistent information, so you're only changing the data that's changed and different reporting timelines and that sort of thing. So it gets you out of doing that.
Yeah, and that's actually, we may need to change our presentation to be more clear that this is something new. We understand what we currently do, but the tool will be a brand new tool.
Yeah, it'll be a brand new.
And I know this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but something to consider as you're thinking through kind of these modules is that sometimes veterans will apply for cert at 2 schools, and it's whoever hits the cert first in the system is who basically gets the veteran for that. And so as we're thinking technologically about this and how all of the ramifications are, you've got 2 schools trying to submit them for enrollment reporting, and how does that error come back? So
This
just
would
something-
actually
That would
detect
be a
that.
great way.
Yeah.
You can actually detect
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I don't know, how would we
The VA
The
comes
VA would
back.
come
way
back.
downstream?
takes it back.
Yeah,
The VA
And you
would
don't
come
find
back.
out sometimes until a month later, and
Yeah.
the student thinks they're getting
That's
their
right.
stuff.
yeah.
Well, as I say, we're also a flight school on top of this. So,
Sorry.
So it has just a different feel altogether when it comes to certifying our student veterans that are in flight. It's not your normal, they're quarter time, they're,
Oh, man.
And the VA is hyper sensitive to it because it's so expensive. So if there isn't anyone on your work who does not have a flight, and in-house
in-house
and
flight.
external, because they have different rules. If they don't have a flight program, I
Actually,
would
I have a
recommend
flight
adding
program
external.
we work with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because
Uh-huh.
I've had schools ask me, I want it at a flight school, and I'm like, don't do it. And you have a large veteran population, don't do it.
Yeah, and ours is a little bit different in that we don't go on the flight. I mean, they just clock hours, but we wait to enter the flight fee until after the hours are flown at the end of the term. And so we'll go in and certify the flight fee after all the hours are flown. So then if a veteran decides that flight's not for me and they're halfway into the term, we're only certifying what they've flown, not the entire flight fee, but we can't put it in until the end of the term. So, but some schools have to enter, a monthly flight log. This is what they've flown, this is the aircraft they were on, so it's just a different reporting that has to take place for those
Yeah.
students.
So Joe, can we add flight time onto the clearinghouse data? That was a challenge, yeah. We don't have that yet.
So, a couple of questions, well, for the group. At Tulane, we do $0 certification early on, and then after Census State, we enter tuition and fees so that our students get housing and book money early. Are others doing that? Okay. And so I
We
would,
certify based upon the hours at the time.
so, and you keep, that's how we used to do it, but we got into
Yeah.
returning too much money, but
Yeah.
at least the housing and the book money
Yeah, you
comes
get that.
early, right? So I would envision with this new model, we could continue to do that in just as we do an early enrollment file with the clearinghouse. I mean, again, it would be a separate process,
Okay.
but the institutions could set up their
Principle, yes.
schedule
Yeah.
the way they need to, right? I mean, it wouldn't be a
That's-
defined schedule, I
Well, I
assume.
think what you want to think about, that this data is going to two different places,
Yeah.
and so they're different tracks. So one data is going to the Department of Ed for enrollment reporting compliance, the other is going to go to the Veterans Amendment. So don't think of them as one entity.
Yeah, it's two separate things.
Two pathways.
Okay.
Yeah, and we need to be clearer in
Yeah.
how we explain that, certainly.
And just another thing, as far as the tracking courses and the course, at the individual course level and repeat courses and failed courses, I would assume there's no reason that couldn't be developed down the line. if that's a real concern for institutions.
For the reporting of the course level.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I don't mean for every course, but when we have to report that a course is, you know, what do they call it, unsatisfactory, you know, grade and that kind of thing. So, I mean, my point is that I think the opportunities are endless, really. I mean,
Well, you have to start,
right.
and we're off to a good start. Again, we paused a little bit, but we'll see some more forward motion soon. And this is actually the first organized meeting that we've had since the work group has been reinitiated, so it's a good way to kick it off. Yeah, Shelby, yes.
So one comment, in partnering with SACRAO and the NSCs, we hope between those two organizations, we have certain convening power to impress upon the major SIS platforms on where there are opportunities to add additional functionality to their reporting modules.
Yeah.
Right? So that's another rationale between getting SACRAO involved. Because when you look at and this is back to what John said about our collective voice is louder than our individual voices. This is where we can come together both with the convening power of the National Student Clearinghouse and SACRAO together, representing 3,600 higher education institutions that are using these 7 or 8 or 10 different software platforms, all interested in the same reporting enhancements, because we hope we can get some attention.
Yeah, versus us going to our provider and saying, hey, I'm a banner school and I need to have this added. We can do that for you.
Yeah.
And you may remember the cha-ching, cha-ching sign,
Right.
and that sound, that's what we get, so.
I love it. What do you think the timeline for it to come to full fruition would be like?
Oh, goodness.
Like 5 years out, 3 years out?
You know, I think it could be quicker. A big part of it is the VBA's interest in building an application programming interface into their VA1 system to accept the data from the clearinghouse. That's the big ask. I mean, this is following the work that John's work group puts together on kind of defining the data elements and how you're going to code them and the timing, and you get a set of specifications. But the big ask is really from the VBA.
And our time frame for our work group is quick.
Yeah.
You know, I would hope that fall, probably the earliest, spring at the latest, we'll be done with our efforts, is what I foresee. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just trying to better define what makes a wheel and how the wheel works. So maybe that's a good way to think
But
of
the
it.
first part is adding the veterans indicator to your existing reporting. And I mean, we looked at the completion rates from the VA for UT Austin, and it was like 30% or lower. Of course, we know it's much higher than that, but they're only counting our student veteran if they're using benefits in the semester in which they graduate. So ours are upward of much, high 80s or 90% completion rate for our student veterans. They perform very well. So just by adding that completion, the veterans indicator in the files that we already report to the NSC, and then having the VA accept that data for completions is a big win. And that can be done in the first 12 months time frame, is what's been estimated out. But the real benefit and the holy grail from our perspective is the certification and the recertification. And the devil's in the details. That's going to really have to roll up our sleeves and wrestle with some really tricky type of work with, like you said, course applicability to their major and adds and drops and the timing and the tuition amounts and all this kind of stuff. But, some of us may remember time before the NSC was created in 1993, and a lot of the same issues came up. That if we're going to go with a clearinghouse, there's going to have to be a lot of really hairy issues that are have to be identified. And as a higher education community, we've demonstrated we've been able to come forward and do that. And I think based upon that success, we're well positioned to do the same here. Again, if there's the institutional will from our community, and if that institutional will can demonstrate compelling rationale to the VA to work with us on this, this is what this effort's about.
Yeah. So when you leave today, or when you get back to your institution, take a look at the Texas website. If you feel inclined to support the effort in that manner, go out there and give us your name and your institution, and we'll add you to the roster of supporters. So we certainly appreciate that.
And I would just echo that, because the clearinghouse was created by that same effort.
Yeah.
It was colleges coming together saying, this process is broken, we've got to get it fixed. And the Department of Education listened, they said, we agree, let's see what we can do. So the more colleges that register their support and are interested, I think it'll be more compelling story for the VA. Right, John?
Yeah. Any other questions today while you have us here? If you're at ACRAO, we're going to do another session at ACRAO. I don't know the time or date or anything yet, but we'll do that. So,
And where are you going to post?
on the conference homepage, there's a place you can go and look at the presentations, so it'll be posted there. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you.